kids now, they wouldn't know where they were.
In Bristol, the past is always just around the corner, waiting to seduce our imagination.
You'd hear the boats all the way up through, all sounding their hooters. Every New Year that happened. I miss that nowadays. It's very quiet.
I remember the times in Prince Street, that in Queen Square, where somebody caught, they used to have the cages, the wire cage. And when they caught a rat in the cage, they didn't kill it. They would take it out of the Queen Square or take it into Prince Street, and then if they had dogs, the dogs go for it.
Have it, yeah.
And as soon as they let the rat out of the cage, all the dogs would go after the rat.
I don't know whether they ever betted on them, but they probably did.
We used to play cricket on Dowry Parade with the middle stump. Had one man there stood looking at the road, up Hartwell Road, and they'd shout out, "Run boys, copper coming," and away we'd run up over the street, and he'd come up after us on his bicycle up over Hope Chapel Hill. But by then he was gone. We were all in there, all in the dustbins, or all in the way, hiding out the way, and he never caught any one of us.
If we went pinching apples over the fields and got caught, we no problem, our dad and let us go to prison and live on bread and water. We knew that for a fact. He wouldn't allow it because he was the boss.
I was making a parrot stand for my pet parrot, and the teacher found fault with it, and he had this chunk of wood in his hand, and he kept hitting my hands continuously, no matter where I moved them, until they were bleeding, and I couldn't stand it any longer. And as he walked back to his drawing board up on the wall, I picked up the mallet, ran towards the door, turned, and I threw the mallet at him. I missed him, and at his valued watch, it was hung up on the board. I heard it smash, and that's the last thing I remember, that classroom. I ran out into Marksbury Road gate, and I stopped and I thought, so, well, what the hell am I going to do? Walked up through the cut, over the cut, up to Cathay, got up into Redcliffe Hill, and wandered down towards the docks. I thought, so anything to take my mind off of what's happened, you know, I was like panic-stricken. I got down the bottom of Guinea Street, and there was a bridge there that leads across the lock gates by the sand. The sand dredge that goes to one side, and the ostrich inn is on the right-hand side. I stood on the bridge just gazing down at the water, and I saw this funny-looking craft. I'd never seen it in the harbour before. And I asked one of these fellows, he had a knife in his belt and his handkerchief around his neck. And I said, well, what kind of ship's that then? He said, that's a whaling chaser, my son. I never heard of a whale, let alone a chaser. He said, do you want to go away to sea? And I said, I never thought about it. Well, he said, we want a boy on board. I thought, of course, this is it. It's one way out of that trouble. So I said, how long have I got there? And he said, well, we're here for another hour loading stores. Get back in, I'll take you back to the ship. So I ran home, running like a bat out of hell. Got hold of a whole carrier bag, stuffed a bit of clothes in, never had much in them days anyway. Got me daps, my favourite daps, put them in. Wrote a note to my mum, told her I was running away to sea. Otherwise I'd been in reformatory school. So I goes back to the ostrich, I jumps aboard this queer looking thing. He backed out of the dock, went down through the Bristol Harbour, went down the river, turned into Avonmouth docks, and I seen this bloody great vessel. Never seen anything like it. There was a whaling factory. It was called the Polar Chief. Found out I was going to be in the galley, peeling spuds and veg, and I was going to wash all the dishes, and that was going to be my life. 2 days later, we sailed out of Avonmouth docks. The next 2 years, it was following the whales.
My father used to work for P&A Campbell, and we were allowed to go on trips whenever we wanted to, but that didn't please me very much. I was a terrible sailor. I only had to smell those ropes, and somehow my stomach would churn. We used to get on the boat in Cumberland Basin if we were going off somewhere, and I do remember even feeling sick before we got to the suspension bridge, which was awful. But one year we were going on holiday to Ilfracombe, and I thought, well, I've got to beat this somehow. I won't look at the water, perhaps that's it. So I'd learned to knit, so I had a knitting pattern, and I head down, started to knit, and I said, I don't want to look up the whole time. And we got all the way to Ilfracombe, and I thought, well, that's the answer. I mustn't look at the water. But I walked down the gangplank, and I was as sick as a dog. So I'm no sailor. I wonder what it would be like on a liner, on a cruise.
This is where we were born, 8 of us in there. Because of the front of the house we had, a lot of people mistook it for a pub. And we used to get people walking in there, and you would say, sorry mate, but it's not what you think it is. Yeah, we used to get quite a lot of people that came in there because of the frontage. We used to get the merchant seamen that come in there that was in the Sailors' Home next door.
Yeah. Yeah, but the old Queen Square was very, very nice place for kids.
Well, it was out there because that used to be our playground. Yeah. All the kids around here used to go out there and play. And what we used to do, of course, was the dockers and some of the merchant seamen, when they had a few drinks in the daytime, they'd go out there and lie on the grass. And after a couple of hours when they recovered, they'd get up and walk away. When they walk away, we go over, and the money in their pockets would come out. Well, that was ours.
It didn't make us rich, though, did it?
Boy, it didn't. No, it didn't make us rich.
My father, he worked at Avonmouth docks, and every night I used to sort of wait by the window to see our dad come up the road. Well, this particular night, I'm looking out the window and I said, Ma, our dad's gone fat. She comes over to the window, she says, oh my God, whatever is it? So anyway, she runs out to the road and runs down the road to get to Getting, and she's helping him at the road. He can hardly get at the road. So he gets in the house. When he took his coat off, we discovered he'd been wounded round with yards and yards of curtain material. Well, our Mustang's in the kitchen, and she's trying to roll it up. And there's our dad turning around like a little top. We had curtains up at our windows all over with curtain material. Also, her 3 daughters all had dresses, but nobody in the road made fun of us. So anyway, I goes to school, and the teacher says to me, oh, Pat, she said, what a beautiful dress you got on. And I said, yeah, I said, Arma made it. She said, did she? She said, oh, how lovely. Where did she get the material? I said, Arma said that she got it in the cells at Bath. So she said, oh, she said, I mean, it's beautiful. She said, I wonder if they got any left. She said, I think I'll go and try and buy some. I said, no, miss, you can't, because our dad said all the doctors was after it, and none of them was lucky.
The whales go in a circular movement. They travel around the world. People don't know much about whales. I didn't know nothing about them. I learned in 2 years. And they shot quite a few, and then drag them up on back of the stern, cut them all up, fledge them, chuck the meat into the big boilers, boil everything up, and the stink was, oh God. I can smell it now. It's horrible. You couldn't go ashore anyway, you know. Everyone knew the way the ship was in. You stunk. We followed the whales down there, past New York, past Bermuda, following down to the South Atlantic. We finished up in Falkland Islands and Stanley Point there, but couldn't pick up no stores in Falklands because they were all skinned. there was no grub on board. They had to come from the Argentine. So we were lucky. We went over to the Argentine, Buenos Aires, up the River Plate. And whoa, what a city. And this chap took me up the flesh pots up at a place called Cinco de Mayo. It was the main street. We'll never forget it. It lived in my memory ever since. And there was I think it was called the Derby Bar and the Cologne Bar. And the notices outside was 300 girls for your entertainment. I thought, oh God, this is heaven. You know, I wish I was older.
Bonfire night was good.
Yeah, the bonfires are all right round the square.
No restriction.
No restriction at all then. When you look at it, it hasn't really altered all that much.
Not a lot. Except that there's not many people that live in there at night.
No, there's nobody at all. No. Apart from one house down on the end that's been bought now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind moving back.
No. If you got the money to buy them.
Well, look at the price now.
Yeah. Certainly noisy now, Ken, up against what it used to be. You're inclined to forget about how much horse traffic was around, horse and carts. And,
You never used to worry about getting knocked down by cars because, as you said, mostly horse and carts were always up here. You had the railway carts, the horse and carts, you had the milk carts, and the baker's carts on the road. When we lived in Prince Street, it was a busy street. And we knew a lot of people that were always walking up and down there. And there was a couple there that were prostitutes. And what they used to do mostly was to play their trade on the ships, mostly the foreign ships. And there was two of them that we knew by name, I knew by name. It was Molly O'Brien, really tough. She was really tough. I've seen as many as 4 policemen getting her into Black Mile. And the other one that I knew, was Cockeyed Leo. Now, about 9 o'clock every night, she used to come through Prince Street on her way down here to the docks. I remember one evening I was there and she was coming past the house, and I shouted out to her, Cockeyed Leo, and the next thing was she hit me with a handbag. Come on, don't trip over that. You've been there a long time.
Yeah.
I was born and bred here in a little place over there called Joy Hill. Wasn't much joy for me though. It was very inaptly named. There were 6 of us altogether, and I tell you, we had a hard life. Around here there were a lot of houses and a lot of people who I knew. They were all neighbours and friends of ours, and the majority of them were dockers or connected with the docks. Of course, all of this is altered very much now. With this flyover here, there were 3 places pulled down, the Caledonia Place, Brunswick Place and Grenville Place, where hundreds and hundreds of people used to live. We all knew one another. We were a very close community. An old docker friend of mine, he used to drink cider. And he came down one day on a full tide, and he must have had half a dozen pints of cider. He got on his bicycle, wobbled across the road, right into the dock. And when we pulled him out, he played hell with us because he had to go back in to get his cap. I can remember walking down there with my mum and dad on a Sunday, and all the neighbours were here, especially if the tide was in, and the paddle steamer would come to pick up the miners from Cardiff. Because in those days, there was a drinks banning in Wells. No public houses used to open on a Sunday. So they all used to get on the boat and come across here and have their fill of beer and get on the boat and go back. Some of them were the worse for wear, but we enjoyed it because we'd walk along behind them and they'd see us walking along and they'd put their hand in their pockets and throw a load of money up in the air for us to pick up. It used to take us about 3 hours to walk from here down to where the Portway now starts, because we were where we met so many neighbours, and they all stopped and had a little chat about one thing and the other. And of course, when they built the Portway, that was all wiped out.
That was my bedroom up there. From that window you could see everything. And if I was ever ill, well then the bed was pushed up to the window, and as long as I had pencil and paper, I could sit there and write down all the registration numbers of the cars that went by, because there weren't that many. There was always plenty going on in the water. Sometimes the diver went down. I suppose he was inspecting the locks. But they used to sit him on this sort of platform thing, dress him up, and they'd put on these huge boots, heavy boots. And then the last of all, they'd put on this huge round ball and seemed to screw it on, and I used to think, his poor head. However, then they'd help him to the edge of the platform, and he'd go down backwards into the water and disappear beneath the murky waters. I often wondered whatever he could see down there, because it didn't look very clean. When the cattle used to come over from Ireland to go to the abattoir, I used to think that was a shame they had to come all this way to go and be killed. And knowing how I felt about travelling on boats, I often wondered, did cattle get seasick? I often wondered, but I never asked, but I still wonder. I wonder if they do.
Went ashore in Cape Town, escorted as usual, and being with the same sailor, he had the same frame of mind. He must have been a dirty old bugger on the quiet, you know. He took me to a place called District 6, and that's where all the brothels was, and all the drinking dens. So all the coppers walking about in sixes. I thought, well, that's strange. So he left me on this bench. He said, I shan't be long, he said. I said, well, what am I going to do here? Well, he said, look at the scenery, he said. You've never seen it before, have you? Then we sailed down to India, through the Indian Ocean, hit a bloody tidal wave, like a damn wall it was. It was a, God, it's like hitting a 100-foot wall of solid steel. The ship stopped. She shuddered, took her head down, thought everything in the bloody galley was going everywhere. It was all flying everywhere. And then she righted herself, and we were riding the tidal wave then. Oh, so cool. That's experience. We get to Bombay. I could see all the oxen and women and all that beautiful, all the Sararas, all the colours. There was beggars there. There was kids who had been blinded. There was people on wheelbarrows carrying their stuff on, being pushed on wheelbarrows with their private parts swollen like melons. They're all suffering from this plague they had out there. And it was absolutely stinking. Mine, fascinating.
You talk about sort of the docking in the job, and they were like kind of heroes. They were men. They had all the faults of men. They was macho men. I mean, Eon EastEnders, that granny's nothing. I mean, these were men, and sometimes when they came home to their wives, they weren't all what they should have been, because they dominated the house. My dad dominated. He was the boss. And Arma, she used to challenge him. Arma was like the first woman's Libera to be. She would challenge him, and she would go to work and not tell him how much money she earned. And when she had things on hire purchase, she would forge his signature. Because then if a woman had anything on hire purchase, her husband had to sign for her. And when once a year he'd get his income tax form, he said to her, now look now, given the wrong information, I could do 6 months in the neck. She said, would I lie to you? Oh, yeah, she would. And she did. She never ever told him how much she earned. And I said, say to her, did you tell him the right? No, let mind his own business. I said, you know, like, what if he got to go in prison? She said, too bloody good. I said to her dad once, why do they call you brother, Dad? He said, because we belong to a brotherhood of men.
We had 800 crew. And a lot of there was everywhere. There was Scandinavian, there was Danish, there was Dutch, there was Russian, there was German, Scotsman, you name it, they were there. And when they got ashore drinking, oh, the best thing to do is get well away from them. There was murder. All you could see was knives flashing, people being cut, and they come on, they stagger back on board, laughing their head off with claret running all over them, gashes down each side of the damn cheeks where they've been slashing each other, one getting stabbed. This was their life. You know, and they chuck a bucket of salt water over it and wash the blood off and go and turn in with the shore clothes on. The next stop was Japan, Kobe, forbidden country to anyone except traders like ourselves. But I was allowed ashore. The same bloke took me. I got taken to this tea room, I think it was, and see this girl with her paper umbrella and her kimono, and oh, she was a pretty little thing. Anyway, he left me in the bloody cafe as normal, right? And he gave me a lemonade. And anyway, he come back, he had a happy smile on his face. We had a look around Kobe, beautiful city. Got on well with it. Well, I couldn't speak Japanese, I couldn't even speak English proper. And anyway, people were quite friendly. I enjoyed it. So back on board, same routine, peeling spuds, veg, washing dishes. Never thought about anything. You know, get up in the morning, start all day. You work on to 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon. Have an hour off to go on deck, have a bit of fresh air, and then, you know, back to work again, and work until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then turn in your kit, in your bunk. Got to the Panama Canal, weren't allowed through, because on board we had explosives. They used explosive heads to blow the whale guts out. And our skipper, he was Lord and Master of the Sea. And if he couldn't control his ship and everything in it, he'd go 1,000 miles out of his way. And that was the type of man he was, an old British sea dog. So we had to go round the Cape again, back to the Falkland Islands, unloaded, stripped the ship right out, and voyage over. We were homeward bound. I was 13 and a half when I ran away from this school. I came home. My mother was pleased to see me. My dad hugged me and shook my hand. And within the hour I had the idea that he promised me when I ran away to sea.
I spent many happy hours here, and I was very sorry, very reluctant to leave Potwells, but there, that's the way of the world. I had to go, and that was that.